Good evening, everybody. Sorry for the delay once again. Um, so I want to begin by calling to mind something that we went over in the first chapter. Pope Francis, he wrote that today's media do enable us to communicate and to share our knowledge and affections, yet at times they also shield us from direct contact with the pain, the fears, and the joys of others and the complexity of their personal experiences. And he said, I think in a previous paragraph, that real relationships with others are kind of being replaced by a type of internet communication. Now, why I'm bringing this up is because, at least for me, this is the first time I've ever really been able to experience only the positives of digital communication. Like I've had a couple of kind of group video thingies, whatever they're called, on Zoom and Hangout. And it's pretty amazing what we're able to do. And I just find it fascinating that we're at a time right now where it's so necessary to communicate digitally. So I've just been thinking about that a decent amount, and I would love to hear your thoughts about it if you have any. Because I mean, we do usually speak about, or at least I usually speak about the dangers of social media and the dangers of digital communication. But I have not really experienced the positives of it, or I have not experienced the positives of it like I have recently. We're physically isolated from each other, and have been able to, but yet we're still able to communicate with each other. So it's been pretty fascinating. All right, I think we left off chapter 2, paragraph 66. I think. So Pope Francis says, by presuming to take the place of God and refusing to acknowledge our limitations, by making ourselves the center of all that is, by our will to power, by all of this and more we have disrupted and broken the harmony meant for us. So the first thing that comes to mind here is simply Heidegger's thought on modern science, when he says that man becomes the relational center of all that is. It blows my mind that Heidegger was not cited in this work. I couldn't understand it for a long time, but I'm still kind of shocked by it. But because I mean, a lot of this is so close to what he says or what he writes that it's shocking that he's not cited. But that's not really that important. So secondly, second point I think worth pointing out is that it says by our will to power. So this is a reference to Friedrich Nietzsche, the German philosopher. That will to power was basically his, or to put it simply, his motto or his theme, one of the themes of his work. And while many see it to be extremely objectionable, it's nevertheless a pretty central aspect of our society, and it truly characterizes the way we have related to nature. So even though, I don't know, I don't think too highly of Nietzsche, he does have his, he was certainly a brilliant guy, albeit a little bit off the rocker, but yeah, he's definitely a smart guy. All right, now moving on to next slide. So it's 66 continued. Thus the mandate to subdue the earth, to have dominion over it, and to till and keep it, has been greatly distorted. So this idea of subduing the earth or having dominion over the earth has often been spoken about in a pretty narrow-minded way. But Pope Benedict XVI, in his book Spirit of the Liturgy, has this quote that I included here. It says, "This does not mean enslave it, exploit it. No, what it does mean is recognize it as God's gift. Guard it and look after it, as sons look after what they have inherited from their father. Look after it so that it becomes a true garden for God, and its meaning is fulfilled, so that for it, too, God is all in all." So that's a quote from Pope Benedict's book called Spirit of the Liturgy. It's a really amazing book. But yeah, also, the next point on this slide, Pope Benedict also shows in his book on, it's called Introduction to Christianity, he shows that Christ actually changed the nature of kingship. And so, to be a lord or a king is actually to serve and not exploit. It's to serve and not be served, to put it differently. So these are very important things to recognize when trying to understand what our faith teaches us about how we are to relate to the earth. Next slide. So we could put it in different language. This would be more theological language. We have disrupted original justice. So original justice, that term means the harmony that existed between God, man and woman, and all creatures before the fall. So it's something that, what is that called? Prelapsarian? I can't remember. Never mind. So it's something that Adam and Eve experienced. But the question is often asked, if Adam and Eve is not historically accurate, which is definitely not to say the same thing as not true, based on our understanding of the Greek word aletheia, then is all this stuff about original justice really, is it BS, for lack of a better phrase? So that brings us to the next slide. We've got a picture here of St. Francis. And I think it would be, I think it would be a mistake to dismiss the notion of original justice like that, even if Adam and Eve is not historically accurate. Because if you think, or once you learn more about the lives of the saints, most notably St. Francis, at least in Western Christianity, you see something strikingly similar to original justice. They're at harmony with themselves, with God, with each other, and with all of creation. And so I would definitely recommend not writing it off. Like this, what we're striving towards is not some like romantic, poetic, what's the word for it? Delusion. But it can be something very real, and it's very attainable. So next slide. This is for paragraph 67 on accusations against Christianity. So it's somewhat of a popular view that Christianity is responsible for the maltreatment of the earth. For example, the idea that we have dominion over the earth. Second one, our only concern is getting to heaven, so who cares about the earth? And third, the Platonic influence within Christianity, which is a direct reference to dualism. So that's viewing the body as a prison. Well, dualism is not necessarily viewing the body as a prison. Dualism is taking two things and opposing them against each other. I mean, that's a really simple way of describing it. But so it would be pitting the body against the soul or spirit. And so that dualism can often lead to the overvaluing of the spirit soul while degrading the body, which is definitely true with Puritans. Now, the first one, the idea that we have dominion over the earth, we just saw that if that has led to maltreatment of the earth, that's just based on a severe misunderstanding. But I will say that we're going to get to the other two next. But I will say that there is some truth in all of these, I would say. But I would say it's distorted, which kind of makes it a lie. I wouldn't say I don't think any of them are actually true for Christianity in general or Catholicism in general. And it's especially not true for Eastern Christianity. And here are a few reasons why that is. For the next slide. First of all, there's an amazing connection between the liturgy and the liturgical calendar with creation. And we're going to actually get into this the week leading up to Easter, so during Holy Week. That's what I'm going to be presenting to you all. Second, think of the sacraments, especially the Eucharist. Okay, every sacrament has a social aspect to it, and every sacrament has a physical aspect to it. Okay, and that's definitely noticeable with the Eucharist. Okay, we don't think it's merely a symbol. We don't believe it's merely a symbol, or really any of the sacraments are merely symbolic. While symbolism may play a role in them, it would be I think it'd be a grave mistake to just limit it to symbolism and not pay heed to the reality that is present within the sacraments. Third, the Church's interpretation of applicable Scripture is another defense, because tilling means cultivating, and keeping is caring and protecting and preserving, and having dominion is serving. So, I mean, there are a lot of this is based on misunderstandings. And fourth, the Church has denounced as heresies negative views of the body, material, creation, and sex. So I think what these four points show is that there are things latent within Christianity that actually foster a very good relationship with the earth. But when these are misunderstood or distorted, crap hits the fan. Thus you have whack jobs like, or I probably shouldn't call him a whack job, but Francis Bacon. I mean, the guy basically spoke of raping the earth, plundering it, and actually thought it was our duty to do so. So yeah, I think most of it is based on misunderstanding. And the next slide, paragraph 68. As it states in paragraph 67, tilling and keeping implies a relationship of mutual responsibility between human beings and nature. So we have a responsibility to care for the earth and respect the laws of nature, and it is an essential aspect of our faith. Now, I want you to chew on that phrase of relationship of mutual responsibility and kind of let that sink in. So take some time to think about that later. But I also want to point out something else that's implied within tilling and keeping. It's involvement. Okay, one of the things the church is not advocating for is that we're hands-off with material creation. We're hands-off with nature or the environment. There are certain times to do that, like the Galapagos Islands. I think it's great that you can't really travel there, at least as freely as you could somewhere else. But I can get more into that later. I mean, think about, a lot of you hunt, so think about the way that through hunting, you're able to respect nature, respect its power, and its capability of sustaining you. Like you can eat deer meat, eat venison, and it's good too. So like by taking care of the earth, we're actually taking care of ourselves as well. And regarding this second point on this slide, that caring for the earth and respecting the laws of nature is an essential part of our faith. I think oftentimes or I guess I can only speak for myself. Before I learned about all of this stuff, I probably thought of taking care of the earth as a secondary aspect of our faith, not something that's actually central to it. But yeah, it is an essential part of our faith. It's something that's a lot more visible in the East with Eastern Christianity. But again, we can get more into that later if you want to. Next slide, number 69. We are called to enact a responsible use, or a kind use. I can't remember if Papa actually uses the phrase kind use. But that's, if he doesn't, then I took that from Wendell Berry and applied it here. So this idea of responsible and kind use actually coincides perfectly with Heidegger's understanding of, or his definition of use. So he says that, genuine use sets a thing free to be nothing but itself. It is associated with freeing and saving. So I think maybe a good example would be, well, we'll just do a simple example. You can't use a hammer as a screwdriver. It just doesn't work. So if you try to use it as a screwdriver, you're not really letting it be what it's made to be, which is a hammer, to hammer things. So I mean, that's kind of a really simple definition or example for it. But also note that there are different kinds of use. There are different ways we can use things. We're not talking about betraying, like, if you said that person used me, then you're thinking about like a betrayal or people taking advantage of you. So this isn't like that. It's more of a using so that you can reuse, so that it stays what it is. You don't turn it into something else. Next point on this slide. Other creatures have a purpose and meaning outside the realm of our utility. The manner in which we relate to these creatures must be open to realms which transcend that of utility. Okay, well, that actually touches on what I was just talking about with different kinds of use. So if it's only within the realm of utility, then yeah, like if people relate to you within the realm of utility and not anything else, then yeah, they're probably taking advantage of you. They're not treating you like the person that you are. So we have to understand that that things of nature, they're not dependent upon us to do what they do. Like they have a being and purpose that extends beyond us. Either Heidegger or Foltz talks about that in a way, but I can't remember what they say. Then this last point, I was just kind of making a nerdy joke, saying, of course, it was the German bishops who speak of the priority of being over being useful. So it's, that's basically saying that, a good example of that would be to treat someone like a person instead of simply as being useful. Okay, next slide. This is continued. Question for you. Do any of you think that our current relationship with particular animals is distorted or disordered? And if this is so, how? I want you to try to think of some examples. And as you think about these examples, I want to take this opportunity to thank our sponsor, Patches Proctology, who is offering a great promotion. First-time visitors get 50% off by using the promo code Sour Patch Kids. So that's Patches Proctology. Enter promo code Sour Patch Kids, 50% off. It's a great deal. So one example I think would be a lot of farm animals like cows, chickens. I've got a slide here showing what looks like thousands of chickens in a factory. And then the next slide is a pug that is dressed like something, Pink Nightmare, perhaps. So I'm going to be putting forth probably the unpopular position that I think we have a disordered relationship with our pets. And it's most easily seen by our relationship with dogs. So many of your dogs have technically been genetically manipulated to be your pets. From what I can tell, it started by arranging very selective breeding. So they would take the two dogs that were the most amicable to humans and breeding them, and then it just kind of goes on and on and on. And by the way, I do really love dogs. Like if you put me in the same room with them, well, at least most dogs, not the little tiny ones because I don't really know how to play with them. I don't want to like squash them accidentally. But anyway, so I'm not like a dog hater by any means. So here's a fun fact. Every single breed of dog is descended from the gray wolf. And in the past 200 years, most breeds of dogs that we know today were created, or in only the past 200 years, most breeds of dogs that we know today were created. So I would say that if you look at a picture of a gray wolf, that is what a real dog looks like. And by real, I mean one whose genetics have not been tampered with, and to such a degree that you end up with pugs or poodles. I mean, at least cats can actually survive on their own. They actually resemble wild cats, like a lynx or bobcat. But some of these dogs are just like tailored to be put in your friggin' purse or whatever. So I've got some problems with that. So if most dogs are, next slide, if most dogs are, technically speaking, genetically manipulated organisms, do you think it's morally licit? That is, morally okay to do so? Does genetic manipulation signify a disordered or distorted relationship? So I think that's a good question to think about. I mean, you could say that, at least initially, by genetically manipulating them, we're making their purpose or significance solely about us. We alter their genes to make them more fitting pets. But I mean, I'm not really taking a side here. I want you to think about that and maybe talk amongst yourselves. Also, I think it's worth bringing up Eskimos and people in Inuit cultures. and their relationship with their dogs. I think it's a great example of a fitting relationship with dogs. Now, like if an Eskimo were to say that their dogs were part of their family, I think they're very justified in saying so, because they actually depend on their dogs for their to survive. With us, that's not really the case. I think oftentimes it's not the case. So I think look, I'm not trying to really advocate for one opinion over another, but I think it is something worth reflecting on. So now on to paragraph 70. It says, disregard for the duty to cultivate and maintain a proper relationship with my neighbor, for whose care and custody I am responsible, ruins my relationship with my own self, with others, with God, and with the earth. When all these relationships are neglected, when justice no longer dwells in the land, the Bible tells us that life itself is endangered. That is a very significant, packed full of meaning. In other words, everything is connected. I mean, that's something definitely worth thinking about. So if we're treating our neighbors like crap, chances are we're probably treating ourselves like crap. At least in some ways, maybe indirectly, but also maybe directly. And by the way, justice in Greek, I think the Greek word for justice is dk. It's delta, iota, kappa, epsilon. And it basically means harmony. Okay, next slide. Everything is interconnected, and that genuine care for our own lives and our relationships with nature is inseparable from fraternity, justice, and faithfulness to others. So I think a helpful image here is a spider web. It should connect with Heidegger's notion of being in the world, because he calls that like a web of meaningful relations or relationships. So when you see your own life as this web of relationships, and of meaningful relationships too, then it becomes easy to see how when you screw up or when you mess with one strand, the vibration is going to be felt all over the place. So I think it's just a helpful image for us to understand that on a more concrete level. Next slide, I included a picture of a spider that I took at High Banks Metro Park. It's a marbled orb weaver, also known as the pumpkin spider, because it changes colors around Halloween. It's a pretty sweet looking spider. All right. I think that's probably a good place to stop for now. Hopefully I'll be able to post a longer lecture tomorrow. Maybe up to paragraph 88 or so. Yeah, tomorrow I'll go up to 88. So remember your homework for questions, I think your 2 questions for paragraphs 75 through 88 are due tomorrow. I think I said at noon. Then after that, I think it's spring breaks. So I don't know. Hopefully I'll be able to meet up with my brother and maybe Mr. Globacar to do a couple podcasts. My brother, he's basically an expert in environmental education. He's very, very skilled in survival techniques and stuff, and is basically kind of like an encyclopedia when it comes to all this stuff. So I thought he would be a fun person to talk to. Do me a favor, email me some questions that you want me to ask him and Mr. Globacar. Hopefully we can make the one with Globacar happen, but if not, at least my brother. So please email me questions that you want to ask, or you would like me to ask him. Like if you have questions about taking care of the environment, or just questions regarding the environment in general, he's a great person to ask. So let me know what questions you have. Email those to me, and have a wonderful night.